The film commences in the year 1850, where we find an author named Herman Melville arriving on Nantucket Island. His purpose in visiting is to meet with an elderly innkeeper named Thomas Nickerson, who happens to be the last survivor of the harrowing sinking of the whaling ship Essex. Upon Herman knocking on the door, Thomas's wife, mistaking him for a customer, initially informs him that they are closed. However, Herman presents a letter of introduction and proceeds to introduce himself, which eventually gains him entry. Subsequently, he approaches Thomas and expresses his strong desire to hear the story of the Essex. Despite his initial refusal, Herman offers all the money in his wallet to persuade Thomas to share his tale, but it proves ineffective. In response, Thomas makes some disparaging comments and asks Herman to leave. Feeling humiliated, the author decides to depart, but Thomas's wife intervenes. She apologizes for her husband's behavior and asks Herman to wait for a while. She then goes to talk to her husband and reminds him of their financial struggles. Eventually, Thomas acquiesces to his wife's request and agrees to share his story with Herman, albeit with the caveat that he will do so for as long as he can bear it. The movie then transports us back to the year 1820, when whaling was a thriving industry, with individuals actively hunting whales for their precious oil. This oil was so valuable that it was a commodity worth trading and even gambling over. We are introduced to Owen Chase, a Nantucket farmer and whaler who is happily married to a woman named Peggy. Owen is employed by a whaling company and excitedly goes to meet with his superiors one day after they promise him the position of captain for their new ship, the Essex. However, his enthusiasm wanes when he learns that they have changed their minds, opting to demote him to the role of first mate instead. They have appointed George Pollard, an inexperienced mariner from a prestigious whaling family, as the new captain. This decision leaves Owen deeply disappointed, and he initially decides to walk away from the opportunity. However, the company offers to increase his wages and promise him the captaincy in the future in a bid to convince him to stay. Owen eventually agrees, but he conditions his acceptance on having a written contract guaranteeing his future captaincy. The following day, as he prepares for a year-long expedition of whaling, his wife expresses her concern. Before leaving, she entrusts him with her locket and extracts a promise from him to return home safely. Later that day, all the whalers gather at the ship dock to watch a group set off on the Essex. Among them is a 14-year-old Thomas, who works as one of the cabin boys on the ship. Once the ship sets sail, Captain George begins issuing orders, creating some initial tension between him and Owen. A short while later, they encounter a problem. The ship's sail becomes stuck, causing it to become unbalanced. Observing the situation, Owen takes matters into his own hands and expertly ascends the mast to unfurl the sail. George, an inexperienced captain, feels envious of Owen's skill. This envy leads George to retaliate that evening by making mean-spirited comments about Owen and his father, which infuriates Owen. However, Owen restrains himself from confronting the captain, choosing to leave the table to escape the humiliation. The story progresses, with George once again taking charge of the ship and giving orders to Owen, who has no choice but to comply. At one point, Owen spots an approaching sea storm and quickly alerts the captain, suggesting they alter their course. George dismisses this advice and insists on proceeding. Shortly thereafter, the storm strikes the ship, causing significant damage. While caught in the midst of the tempest, the captain orders a retreat, but Owen maintains that it is already too late, urging the crew to hang on for dear life. Fortunately, the crew manages to endure the storm and save their lives. Once the storm subsides, George decides to return to Nantucket to repair the damaged ship. He also instructs Owen to write a letter of apology in which he must acknowledge his failure to follow the captain's orders, which ostensibly put the crew at risk. Owen is incensed by this and finally confronts George, asserting that it was the captain's decision to sail into the storm and endanger the crew. In response, the haughty captain berates Owen and warns him not to overstep his bounds. He further boasts about his family's esteemed legacy. After a heated exchange, the two eventually agree to set aside their differences and cooperate. The story then fast-forwards 3 months to a time when the Essex is situated in the middle of the ocean. They finally encounter a substantial number of whales swimming nearby. Without delay, they launch their whaling boats and approach the magnificent creatures with the intention of hunting them. As they get closer, Owen harpoons a sperm whale, which prompts the whale to dive deep into the sea. The crew waits for the whale to succumb, but it continues to swim deeper. As their ropes start to run out, some crew members suggest cutting the whale loose to avoid being pulled under. However, Owen insists on waiting, and this proves to be a prudent decision as the whale finally perishes just before they run out of rope. Afterward, they tow the whale back to the ship and begin the process of extracting its valuable oil. However, the opening in the whale's head is not sufficiently large, which complicates the extraction process. As a result, Thomas, being the youngest and smallest among the crew, is tasked with entering the whale's head to scoop out the remaining oil. Several months elapse without any more whale sightings. The crew faces a serious problem in that their food supplies are running dangerously low. George eventually realizes that the Atlantic Ocean offers no signs of whales, prompting the Essex to sail to the Pacific with the hope of better fortune. After a lengthy journey, they arrive in Atacama's, Ecuador. There, they encounter a Spanish captain who informs them that his crew found a bountiful region known as the offshore grounds, located 2,000 miles to the west. However, he also recounts a harrowing tale of a massive, vengeful white whale that destroyed his ship, resulting in the deaths of 6 of his crew members. In spite of the warnings, George and Owen dismiss the story as a mere myth and decide to lead the expedition westward. 14 months later, they reach the offshore grounds, as described by the Spanish captain, which is located in the heart of the ocean. True to his words, the crew encounters a pod of whales, bringing great excitement to the crew, who believe that they can obtain all the oil they need and return home. Without hesitation, they launch their whaling boats and sail toward the waiting whales. However, as they prepare to initiate the hunt, a colossal sperm whale with distinctive white, scarred skin suddenly attacks Owen's boat, overturning it. In the aftermath of this attack, Owen and his crew members must swim back to the Essex and swiftly repair their damaged boat. As they navigate this perilous situation, the white whale inexplicably mounts another assault, this time targeting the Essex itself. The ship sustains damage, resulting in a breach that sends the crew into a state of panic. Owen, however, remains resolute in his determination to hunt down this white whale. He loads an extra harpoon and hurls it at the white whale, striking it right on target. The whale begins to swim downward, and the rope, which is tethered to the ship's mast, swiftly runs out, causing the entire vessel to start collapsing. This leads to the harpoons piercing the whale's body being freed, once again setting it free. With the Essex rapidly sinking, the crew must make the agonizing decision to abandon ship. They hastily collect whatever food supplies they can and board the 3 remaining whaling boats. Suddenly, the whale oil they had collected earlier catches fire, resulting in a cataclysmic explosion that obliterates the Essex. The crew members now face the daunting task of sailing hundreds of miles to reach the nearest shore, armed with extremely limited supplies. On the morning following their departure, they study their navigational maps and begin their arduous journey. After 48 days of being stranded, one of the crew members succumbs to starvation while still on the boat. The others decide to wrap his body and cast it into the sea, but Owen intervenes. He implores them not to discard anything that can potentially sustain their survival. Although initially taken aback by the idea, the crew ultimately resorts to cannibalism as a means of survival. A grim and agonizing decision that deeply affects young Thomas, who breaks into tears at the harsh reality of their situation. Presently, the older Thomas is overwhelmed with guilt over his involvement in cannibalism and halts his narrative. Herman, deeply moved by the story, inquires whether Thomas has ever shared this experience with anyone. Thomas confesses that he hasn't even divulged it to his wife, fearful that she might not love him after learning of his actions. It is at this moment that his wife, who has been secretly listening to the story, enters the room and reassures Thomas of her enduring love. This encouragement emboldens Thomas to continue recounting the rest of his story. Returning to the past, the crew members have been marooned for a harrowing 71 days. Their 3 boats have become separated due to ocean currents, and tragically, one of the boats is lost. The situation has deteriorated to the point where the occupants of George's boat even draw straws to determine which of them should be sacrificed for sustenance. One day, the white whale resurfaces one last time, and Owen positions himself for a final confrontation. The whale breaches for a moment, affording Owen a view of a portion of his previous harpoon lodged above the whale's eye. However, Owen hesitates and gazes into the left eye of the whale as the creature gazes back at him. In a moment of compassion, Owen lowers his harpoon, choosing not to kill the whale. After this encounter, the magnificent white whale swims away peacefully and is never seen again. Several days later, a passing ship spots George's boat, leading to their eventual rescue. In the meantime, Owen's boat continues to drift aimlessly without food and water. The survivors are on the brink of death when their boat finally reaches one of Chile's islands. Here, they are saved and transported back to Nantucket, where they are joyously reunited with their anguished families. Before returning home, however, the survivors are summoned by the owners of the Nantucket whaling ships to discuss the incident. The executives implore George and Owen to conceal the true story to protect the reputation of the whaling industry. Owen vehemently refuses, contending that it would be unjust to dismiss what the crew endured. In a definitive act of defiance, he resigns and departs. On that day, young Thomas encounters Owen one last time, and Owen bestows upon him a whalebone pin before taking his leave. The subsequent day at the court, motivated by Owen's principles, George comes forth with the truth, much to the chagrin of the ship owners. In the present, Thomas reveals that Owen, a man of his word, dispatched a ship to rescue the surviving castaways from the island. Regrettably, Matthew had already passed away, but the team successfully saved the other 3 survivors. According to Thomas, Owen subsequently continued to sail the seas and became a merchant captain, while George pursued another failed endeavor to locate and kill the white whale. Having listened to the entire story, Herman expresses his gratitude to Thomas, acknowledging that he has learned a valuable lesson about courage. In the final scene, Herman has successfully completed his novel, which he has titled Moby Dick. This literary work goes on to become a major success in America. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.